Today we're studying the second lesson of our quarterly, and the title of it is The Birth of Moses. If you'll remember, last Sunday we studied about how Israel was enslaved into Egypt and how they got there, and then a decree that went out from Pharaoh that all the boy babies should be killed, and how that was followed or not. But we're going to study the birth of Moses. You know, as I was studying this morning, when a child is born, that first day, the little bundle of joy, how it's so little, and so innocent and so helpless, as it can be. And then you fast forward to the day that they die, however old they may be. They may live to be in their 80s or even older than that, or they may die young, What happens from the time that child is born to the end? A lot can happen in that amount of time. You take, they can be a very, very good Christian or a prophet, such as Moses was. We know the whole story of Moses and how Moses was so meek. Well, how did he get that way? A lot of it was by training. A lot of it was by how he was raised and how he was conducted himself. Let's take Samson, for example. Now, I'm getting kind of off the lesson here, but let's take Samson, for example. He was a Nazirite. He was considered a Nazirite as far as taking the oath. The mother took the oath and laid it upon him. But look how he turned out. He turned out a whole lot different than what Moses did. Look at Ahab and how he turned out. Not a very good person, Herod, not a very good person, But then, you got others that Jeremiah, very good prophets, and different ones, His mother does not know how he's going to be raised here. Moses, this is what I'm talking about. His mother does not know how he's going to turn out. And when we have our children, we don't know how they're going to turn out. We try to do the best we can to raise our children and all this, but we never know how they're going to turn out. They have their own will within them. Me and the wife raised three boys. They look somewhat alike. Everybody says, well, you can tell they were all made from the same pattern. Okay, well, maybe so. But every one of them has their own individual characters, The oldest one is different from the middle one, and the middle one's different from the youngest one, and the youngest one's different from the oldest one, You have to treat every one of them a little bit different. And that's the reason why we have to ask God to help us when we raise our children and all that. We might think we know how to raise children, but we've never done it before. I never had done it before until I raised them three, and we had to get our advice and our wisdom from God in knowing how to raise these children, and we have to. Here I'm kind of setting the situation here. The birth of Moses. I'm going to read a junior emphasis here. God has a plan. You've got an adult emphasis there. You won't see the junior emphasis, but I'm going to read it anyway. God has a plan to save Moses from being drowned in the river. And that was the decree that went out. First of all, he says, kill all the boy babies to the midwives, kill all the boy babies. Well, that didn't work so well. And so they decided, well, okay, we'll have the people to drown their babies then, the boy babies, in probably the River Nile. And what mother wants to do that? That don't work very well either, because everybody thinks their baby is the best and the cutest baby in the hospital. It's natural. They always think it's the cutest, and sometimes, especially if it's not your own, well, that ain't that cute a baby, but they're proud of it, so okay. But they do. My 3 children was the cutest babies in the hospital. And when they were born, I cried at every one of them. Just, God is merciful to me that this little thing has got 5 fingers on each hand, 5 toes on each foot, and perfect little bundles, And I know this is a way that Moses' folks thought the same way. I know that's what they thought, God could have changed things. When the decree went out and said all the boy babies are going to be drowned, but the girls' babies can survive, Okay, God could have made all the mothers to conceive girls if he wanted it to. He could have done that. But did he? No, he didn't. There was probably just as many boys as there was girls conceived when this time was going on. But God has a purpose in everything that happens. Everything that happens, God has a purpose. God knows that it's going to happen. God knows how to work in the situations that arises. Let's look at our memory verse. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Keep that in mind. If we have time, I'm going to expound on that a little bit later after we read the main part of our lesson there. But all things work together for good. What does it say? We know that all things work together for good. Now, if it just stopped there, that means everybody. But what does it say? To them that love God. That makes a difference. So keep that in mind then as we study our lesson here. Let's go into Exodus 2:1. The Bible says, And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived, and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. A goodly child. As I was trying to paint the picture there, every parent thinks they've got a goodly child, don't they? You don't see a Charles Manson in your newborn baby, or a Hitler in your newborn baby. You always see the best, You always see the best. And this is the way this woman was. I'm trying to think of her, Jochebed, I think's what her name was. And I can't pronounce his name very good. It's A-M-R-A-M. Amram. Say that? Amram, okay. Was the father and mother of Moses there. And it says, it sets the picture there. And it says then that she hid him 3 months. We know the reason why. If he was found, he was more likely going to be dead. They were going to kill him if they found him. So she had to hide him. She had to hide him. Last week we read how Pharaoh ordered that the Israelites kill all their baby boys Of course, they did not want to do that. One family had a baby boy, which is this one right here we're talking about here. He was a nice baby, and of course they loved him. Well, what mother does not love their baby? You know, you would have to be kind of a mother that's kind of off track mentally, you know, if you don't love your baby. And you know, this is just natural. You take animals out there, they do everything they can to protect their young, don't they? You know, you take an old goose, she's going to protect them eggs, you know, and then after the eggs hatch, well, she's going to take care of them babies, you know. And, you know, it's just natural that they do that. They wanted to keep him. And so what'd they do? His mother had to hide him for 3 months. God too wanted that baby to live. God too wanted Moses to live. He had a great work for him to do. The parents didn't know that at the time, you know. They had a child, you know, and they didn't know what kind of a prophet he was going to be, you know. God had a work, and you know, God had a work for him to do. But you know, God has a work for each and every one of us. You know, I was a baby at one time. My mom and dad was proud of me, you know. And you know, God has a work for me to do also. Sure. He has a work for each and every one of us to do. We were all babies. You know, it might have been a while ago since we were babies, but you know, we were babies one time. One time on April the 22nd of 1955, here I came. You know, I decided that here I am, you know. And you know, my parents took care of me, raised me to the best of their ability with God's help. God has a work for each and every one of us. He has work for you to do, me to do, and for each and every one of us to do. If we obey Him, He can use us as He wants us. You know, we may not be a prophet. You know, we may not go and get the Israelites and lead them out of Egypt. You know, because that don't have to be done anymore. Moses took care of that. That's right. You know, but you know, He has a job for us to do. You know, He may send us somewhere to get a sinner and lead them out of bondage. Sure. You know, and we can be that person that can help them. We can't save them. There's no way we can save them, but we can lead them to who can save them, and that's through Jesus Christ. And so each and every one of us has a purpose in life, whether we think we have a purpose or not. We have a purpose in life. God has a purpose for each and every one of us. Let's go ahead and read that second part there, Exodus 2 and 3. And when she could no longer hide him, she took for him an ark of bulrushes and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. You know, babies grow up. You know, 3 months later, this baby's getting a little bigger, you know, and he's, you know, starting to cry. Well, he cries anyway, you know, but he, you know, his lungs gets a little stronger, and they can hear, and one thing and another. So, what has to be done here? They could not keep him hidden forever. What should they do? They had to ask of God, what can we do? You know, if nothing's done, this baby's going to be found, you know, and you know, we're going to have to drowned it, or it's going. A soldier might find it and drown it then. So, it doesn't say in the Bible that God came and told her to make that basket and to make that ark, but that was what was impressed upon her to do, was to make a little ark there, make a little basket to put, so she can put him in. But there was a problem, that basket could sink. And so that's the reason why she put pitch around it, to keep the water out and keep the baby dry, and put him in. The Pharaoh told him to throw him into the river. Well, she put him in the river, but it wasn't for the purpose that Pharaoh wanted him to be put in there, But, she did what Pharaoh said, but she kind of did it in a kind of a deceiving way, But she took that ark and she made it, fixed it so that the water would stay out. And she put the baby in and closed it over. And then she took her daughter, Miriam, and said, which was the baby's sister, and said, watch that baby. Watch your little brother. Watch him there. Miriam was probably in the neighborhood of, I'm a guessing 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 years old. I don't know how old she was, but she was a child yet. She was a child. But she did what her mother said. She followed the orders of her mother. And we as Christians must keep our children under subjection with the household. It seemed like this girl had really been raised right, because she done exactly what her mother told her to do. We see children now that, man, it's terrible the way some children act. If you don't believe me, all you got to do is go to a grocery store or go to a 5 and 10 cent store. Of course, they don't have them 5 and 10 cent stores anymore, but go to a store or go to a restaurant or somewhere, and oh my, children are something else. They sometimes they can cause a lot of ruckus. I don't think Miriam was one like that. She followed what her mother had sent for her to do. They went to the river, and then as she was watching it, Pharaoh had ordered them, only she did not cast him in to be drowned. She laid him in, protected by the ark like a little boat. Then, leaving Miriam afar off to watch, the mother went home. Was she praying and trusting God for the baby? I'm sure she was. It doesn't say that, but I'm sure she was. She had no idea what was going to happen. And it's like us each and every day. We have no idea what we're going to face in a day's time. When I leave for work about, usually around 7 o'clock, and I never know what I'm going to face. I think I know. There's a lot of things I have planned that oh yeah, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do this, and a lot of times it's kind of pretty routine, but there's something that comes up usually during the day oh, I didn't know that was going to happen, and things has to be thought out. Well, here she had him placed in the river, in that little ark, not knowing what was going to happen. Maybe day after day. Miriam, you watch the baby. We'll take it to the river. You watch the baby, I don't know how long that went on. It doesn't say. And as far as I have ever read in the Bible, I don't know if this went on for weeks or maybe the first day. I don't know. But she was praying and trusting God for that baby. It doesn't say that she was praying, but I assume that she was praying and trusting. You know, this woman was a Levite. Her husband was a Levite also. And you know, Levites was later on became priests then, you know, because they were of the house of Levi. But at this time, they wasn't priests yet. And but they were Levites, is what they were. So therefore, what made me say Abraham? Moses and Miriam, and then they had another brother named Aaron that was older than Moses, and all three of them were Levites because their parents was Levites. You know, if which I've got some German in me. Well, where did I get it from? From one of my parents, see? You know, and that's the way it was handed down, as they were a descendant of Levi. Let's go to that verse 5 then, and let's see what this says. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. Can you imagine seeing this little ark floating along and, wonder what that is, you know? We might think, wonder what's in there, you know. Is there trash in there, or what is in there, you know? Is it, but you know, it's so well kept, you know. It made her curious. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, this is one of the Hebrew children. God worked on her as soon as she opened that little basket up. She had compassion on him. You know, God was working on Pharaoh's daughter. God had a plan. Jochebed was following that plan the best that she knew how. And was she deceived that it wasn't a Hebrew child? She knew right off that it was a Hebrew child. And her dad had already said that they was going to kill them, you know. They were going to kill him. But she knew what she had in her hands there. She knew what was in that ark there, that it was a Hebrew child. But God was working with her in a mighty way. God does not change history, or does not change things, but He changes people, is what He does. He changes their mentality a lot of times. And you know, to get people to work the way that it can be worked. Now, I know we still have a free moral agent in choosing. He does not take that away, but he does convince us, you might say. And that's what He did, I feel like, here of the daughter of Pharaoh. That when she opened that up, she fell in love with that little baby. She fell in love. Then said his sister, which was Miriam, to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call to thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee? She had a little plan in her mind, didn't she? Where'd that come from? Probably her mother was the one that did that. And she says, if he's found, try this and see if that will work, you know. And then come and get me, and you know, we'll try that. Miriam done what she was told to do. Miriam didn't fall asleep, you know, and wasn't sleeping at the time, you know, or she wasn't off playing somewhere or fishing in the river or anything like that. She done exactly what her mother did. You know, that's the reason. And you know, some of us older people, you know, really kind of have to keep that in mind. You know, we can't fall asleep on God. We can't go fishing on God. We can't, you know, we got to pay attention to what God has for us each and every day, you know. You know, God tells us, you know, be alert, be what you want, be what I want you to be. You know, we have to do that each and every day. Just like Miriam here did as her mother had commanded her. And it goes on in verse 8, and it says, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Yeah. God's working. You know when people follows God's leadings, the puzzle just comes together just so completely, doesn't it? You know, if we as people can only figure out that God knows what He's doing all the time. Not just once in a while, but He knows what's going on all the time. And He knows how to bring things together. You know, you think, well, was this a coincidence, or was this just happened? No, God led that, you know. I'll tell you what a coincidence is. The last two days, I've went to 2 different funerals. Yeah. One of them was my brother-in-law on Friday, and Saturday I went to a friend that I used to deliver milk to. I'll tell you what the coincidence is. This lady was born July the 7th of 1930. July the 7th. 7/7/30. Okay? Now the coincidence is on 7/7/7, July the 7th of 07, she turned 77. Now, that's what I call a coincidence there, you know. But, God didn't plan that. God knew it, but He didn't plan that, that would happen like that. But, God planned what this was. Sure. This was all in God's leading. Was that in God's leading? Probably not, 7/7, she turned 77, But, this is, though, here. And God had His hand in what was going on. Let's look at this. The baby was found. Would the baby die? Well, that's the big question, as you was reading this story, if it was the first time you ever read it, you thought, oh, this ain't going to turn out good, This, you can read a novel, and you think, oh, this ain't going to turn out good. And, things change. But, this is the way this could have happened here. The baby was found. Who found it? Pharaoh's daughter. Who's Pharaoh? Daughter? The daughter of Pharaoh, which is the one that made the decree to kill the babies, Soon Pharaoh's daughter came to bathe herself in the river. Her maiden servants was with her. She saw the ark. She had her servant bring the ark to her. She looked in, and the baby cried. But there's 4 more words that the writer of our lesson wrote that really changed things. It touched her heart. And it was by God's hand. God seen Moses there, and He says, that's going to be the guy that leads my children out of Egypt into a promised land, that the covenant that I made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. This is going to be the guy he's going to grow up, and he's going to be the one that's going to lead them out. Natural pity stirred in the heart of Pharaoh's daughter. Would she follow her heart or her father's policy? For surely she recognized the babe as one of the Hebrew children. The sisters offer to call a Hebrew nurse for the child brought a command to go and get her. Go and get a nurse for me. I can't take care of the baby. It needs a nurse. Go get a nurse for her. Miriam gladly running home. Mama, 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 mama. They found the baby and they want you to come. They want you to come and be the nurse for it. It was still shaky ground, though, as we look at it, you think, well, Is this a setup or what is it, you know? But what happened? Gladly Miriam called her mother, the one person who most desired to nurse that child, her own son. And you know, that's what happened. You know, when we follow God's leading, things work out like that because He loves us. You know, He does everything He can to help us in our everyday life interaction with other people, with situations, or whatever. God takes care of each and every one of us if we will only let Him do that. Let's look at verse 9 there, 9 and 10. And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, talking to the mother is who she's talking to, take this child away and nurse it for me. And then she adds something else here. And I will give thee thy wages. She's even going to pay her to raise her own child. A child that was doomed to be drowned in the river Nile, in the Nile River. And she's going to take that child. That child made an impression on her, didn't it? No, more than anything, God made an impression on Pharaoh's daughter to protect Moses is what happened. And the woman took the child and nursed it. Can you imagine going back home? My, all these other mothers that had babies that were killed, and here mine is going to be saved, you know. What joy was in Jochebed's heart as she went home then to take care of Moses, her own child. And then they're going to pay her to take care of it too. What does verse 10 say? And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, because I drew him out of the water. All because Jochebed had an idea that I know was sent from God to preserve this little child, you know. And her following it, she said, oh, you know, she could have said, oh, that's too much trouble. I'll just take my chances and see what happens, you know. You know, a lot of times we as Christians will sometimes kind of slough off a little bit like that. Oh, you know, that's too much trouble. We've got to be careful in what we do, you know. And when God tells us to do something, you know, I've mentioned this time and time again. We need to do it. We don't need to do more than what He says, but we better do at least what He says. You know, it's very important, you know. And, you know, and like I've said so many times, God will tell us to go, and we want to stay. And then sometimes God will tell us to stay, and guess what? We want to go. You know, that seems like human nature. But you know, we got to take that human nature and give it to God and say, God, here, help me to be able to follow you. That's what she did. That's what Moses' mother did here. Okay, I'm going to make this little basket. I'm impressed to make this little basket. I'm going to make this little basket. Put him in the water there. Miriam, you sit there and watch it. You know, if anything happens, you know, tell him, do you want me to go get a nurse? So that's what she did. Miriam, everybody had to be playing their part, you know. What if Jochebed would have been out there instead of Miriam, you know? Probably wouldn't have worked right. What if Aaron would have been out there? Well, I think he was a little younger. Wasn't he younger than in between the two? But anyway, that's not how God wanted it. God wanted it this way, and it all worked out for the good there. And as Pharaoh's daughter came out, she found a baby. And then Miriam did exactly what her mama told her to. You know, you want me to go find a nurse? And the daughter says, yeah, go find a nurse. Go find it. She runs gladly and quickly. She called her mother. And then Pharaoh's daughter handed the baby to her and said, here, take care of it. And I will pay you for it. You know. Did she know that that was the mother? I don't know whether she did or not. I don't know if she did at that time. But she knew it was somebody that could take care of it and would take care of it. When he was old enough to leave his mother then, she took it to Pharaoh's daughter and gave it to Pharaoh then. You know, do you remember anybody else that took their baby somewhere and gave it to somebody? My mind's thinking of how Hannah, what's that her name? Hannah took Samuel to the temple. You know, she made a plea with God. She couldn't have children. And she made a plea with God. She said, if you'll give me a child, I will give it back to you. And God heard her prayer. God answered her prayer. And you know, that's kind of the same way here. And look how Samuel turned out. Look how Samuel turned out, you know. And, you know, God has a plan. And it's up to us to follow. She made him as her son, talking about Pharaoh's daughter. She even named him Moses because she brought him out of the water. And that's what that name means, is brought out of the water. She gave him the best education possibilities. You know? However, his own mother taught him to love his people and to love and obey God. The little amount of time she had him, and I'm sure that they've seen each other off and on as he got older, you know. But she always, it doesn't say that in the Bible, but the impression is, she always said, remember your people. You're not an Egyptian. You're an Israelite. And remember your people and remember God. And that's one thing that I think that Moses did then. He took the advantage of what was set before him in education and all that, but he still remembered what God had done for him. Let's look at our memory verse there. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are called according to his purpose. I waited until now to really look at that memory verse there. I wanted to go through this lesson and show you how things worked. It wasn't just one thing, or it wasn't just two things, but you know, it just seemed like there was several things that had to fall in place. Right. Now, who could have manipulated that so that it would work out that way? Not me, not Jochebed, not Amram, nobody like that, but it was God. It was God that put the pieces together. How God works, that's the way it is with our life. God knows how to make all things work together for good. He used Pharaoh's order. He used Pharaoh's daughter. He used Jochebed and Miriam, even a crying baby. By them, he saved Moses' life and gave him an education for the work he was to do. Even the crying baby. Don't you know that when Miriam would hear that baby cry, oh, I wish he'd be quiet. Oh, I wish he'd be quiet, she probably thinks, you know. But you know, that might have been what got her attention, was that crying baby, you know. You know, we sometimes think, and like she probably thought, oh Lord, help him to be quiet, help him to be quiet. No, that's exactly the opposite. God wanted to bring that attention at that time, you know. And so because he was working on him. You know, and that just seemed like the most inopportune time, you know. And you know, that's the same way it is with us as God works with us, you know. It's never a good time for some things to happen, it seems like. But you know, when God's working, it's the exact right time. It's the exact right time. Oh, let's see. And them he saved Moses' life and gave him an education for the work he had to do. What if the princess had not gone to the river that day? What if the Pharaoh's daughter hadn't gone to the river at that day? Well, God knew she was. Miriam didn't know she was. Jochebed didn't know she was going to go to the river that day, but God knew it. Or what if Miriam had not been obedient? Do things work for good to everyone? No. The answer is no. Only to them that love God. That's what the scripture says. Only to them that love God. When we love God and obey and trust Him, only then can we know that all will come out right. And then the commentator says, trust God. You know, that's very important for us to trust God. Yeah. You know who God is. Obey God, know what His commands are, and then trust Him. And you know, a lot of people can do maybe the first two and do what, but they'll get up to the trust part and they just can't trust God. And you know, it's all for naught then when you do. But let's trust in God. You know, Moses was guilty of one thing, and that was being a son. Moses was guilty because he was born as a baby. And it wasn't his fault that he was a boy, no. You know, but he was guilty of that. Jesus was guilty of one thing, and that was being the son. And he was sentenced to death. Moses was sentenced to death here. You know, because he was a son, because he was a boy. Jesus was sentenced to death because he was the son. Moses will later on, as we study, Moses was saving the slaves from bondage of Pharaoh and going to take them to Canaan. Jesus is saving sinners from bondage of Satan and is putting them into the church. And so, you know, there's a close representation between Moses and Jesus in this. And we will learn more about it as we study it. But you know, the types and antitypes was between Moses and Jesus. And you know, Moses was sentenced to death, just like Jesus was sentenced. You know, King Herod done the very same thing, you know, after Jesus was born. All baby boys 2 years old and younger was facing a death sentence too. And so, you know, we have to kind of keep that all in perspective there. I'm going to go ahead and read some more here that is not in our lesson here. It's a continuation because our next lesson is the call of Moses, and he wasn't called in Egypt. And I'm going to read here how he got to where he was then when he was called then. And this was a period of several years later. Verse 11 says, "And it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown, that he went out unto his brethren and looked on their burdens, and he spied an Egyptian smiting a Hebrew, one of his brethren." Verse 12, "And he looked this way and that way, and when he saw that there was no man, he slew the Egyptian and hid him in the sand." Verse 13, "And when he went out the second day, behold, 2 men of the Hebrews strove together, and he said to him that did the wrong, Wherefore smiteth thou thy fellow?" Verse 14 says, "And he said, Who made thee a prince and a judge over us? Intendest thou to kill me as thou killed the Egyptian?" And Moses feared and said, "Surely this thing is known." And that's when Moses left Egypt then and went into another land. Now, I think it's called Midian, I believe is what it was, is where he went to then. And that's where our lesson's going to pick up then next week. And so I kind of wanted you to get caught up on that. But you know, as we have studied this morning, I want to read this part here in the points to consider. It's the influence of a mother. You know, a mother has a lot of influence on children. Oh yes, fathers do too, but mothers has a lot of influence on children. How much of Moses' character, his loyalty to his people, his obedience to God, his respect for God's way above the pleasures of the world were due to his mother's training in his earliest years. There had to be something that really got a hold of Moses. And I'm sure it was through his mother. His father might have had a little part of it, but you know that mother is the part that is the nurture of a child, you know. Brings things together so beautifully. I know my mother had a lot to do with the way I think in spiritual things and all. My father has an impression on me too, but you know, my mother has a lot of impression on that. Why did God arrange for him to have this season in her care? You know, we can ask that question. Why did he? You know, he was I think just building upon the blocks, you know, that one of these days Moses is going to be a very important person. Consider, what if she had pushed off her responsibilities upon a babysitter? I thought that was kind of cute the way he worded that, you know. And there's so many mothers that is pushing the responsibility of raising children onto babysitters. You know, you see that. And you see what kind of children's being raised too. A babysitter's not going to raise a child the same as the mother raises a child. No, they don't. What if she had thought early training mattered little, or that he would find the right path later or on his own, you know. You know, that's the reason why we have parents. You know, when I was a child, if I was just turned loose to do whatever I wanted to, I don't think I would be who I am. Matter of fact, I know I wouldn't be, you know. And so, you know, God had a plan. Family is very important. And if you don't believe it, all you got to do is read this lesson right here. Family is very important. And, you know, when each one of us is doing our part, whether you're the mother or whether you're the father, you know, when we are doing our part and getting the guidance from God, what does it say in I think it's Proverbs? Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. He will know, or she will know, the right way to go if we do our part. Our part is, you know, sometimes it gets hectic. I know it gets, you know, all the time, you know, ingraining things into children, you know. You know, you don't just tell them once and they, oh, okay, you know, they do it, you know. I guess if you got a child like that, well, you got a pretty good child, you know. Mine wasn't quite that way. And I can remember back, I wasn't that way. So, you know, wouldn't it be nice if you could just tell them one time and that would happen? But it don't. And so that's the reason why we kind of have to be persistent in what we do. And so, you know, this is quite a lesson on Moses here. But look how Moses turned out. It all paid off in the end. So I'm going to leave that with you then.